Here we are again with what did you want to be when you grew up? So, Sam, you had a couple of things you wanted to talk about, kind of start out with, and then we
Yes.
can jump back into some other stuff as well. So, go ahead, shoot. What do you want to say or ask?
Yeah. Okay. So, there in the news, there have been a lot of layoffs recently. And in talking with other like former coworkers and things like that, um, some people I know personally have been affected by that. And so Jeremy you've been self-employed for a long time and had your own business and everything. And so I wanted to ask there are a lot of people freelancing, it seems, from some of the things I've read. There are a lot more freelancers out there nowadays than there have been in years previous. And so I wanted to ask you um, to share, if you wouldn't mind, sharing your experiences of what influenced you to go out on your own. Um, and what are some of the pros and cons of being independent, running your own business, that sort of thing? And what are some things that, and I can remind you of these questions, you don't have to
Yeah,
remember all this stuff, but what are some of the things that you did not anticipate, both on the positive side and on the negative side?
yeah.
Um, so let's start with like kind of your story and what influenced you to go out on your own.
So the biggest thing that actually kicked us over the edge, and I say us because this is not just about you as an individual person, unless you aren't in a serious committed relationship. If it literally is just you, you have a lot more freedom and flexibility to do this kind of thing because you don't have kids,
Right,
a spouse, a boyfriend, girlfriend, someone like that that your financial life and your future are intertwined with. So in some ways we should
right,
separate that out a little bit because if you're on your own, in a lot of ways you have some serious advantages because in your mind the dream of being self-employed and all of that, it's you can execute on that without having to get full engagement and agreement from your significant other, whomever that is. Or if you have
right.
younger kids, something like that, if it requires moving around physically, if you've got to relocate, things like that, that can make things a lot more difficult. So you need to be sold on this kind of thing either early on or at least have gotten really good buy-in from the rest of the family unit, the whatever you call it. That is basically your family
Yeah,
in this context, even if you don't think of yourself as a traditional family unit. Totally cool. But you've all got to be on the same page at some level. So some of that is very deeply rooted in financial issues. Do you have
right.
some kind of emergency fund saved up? If you don't, it's very, very, very hard. It's already hard to become self-employed independent contractor in most things. I mean, yes, you can go and become an Uber driver very quickly, but you still need to have a good car. You have to get special insurance for that kind of a job. You can become an independent contractor that way, but at least from my perspective, and I don't know the details specifically about Uber, Lyft, or any of the other ones, but a lot of those types of self-employment options, they kind of they the big companies end up skimming off so much of the value add along the way that the people at the end don't really get enough to make a really good living. Yes, you can scrape
Mm,
by, you can maybe even do pretty well, but it can be a lot more challenging because you're working with something like that. You may be better off working for companies you used to work for. Like if you're in the layoff situation, really, unless you're well financially prepared and you have a good emergency fund and you can tolerate being without any pay for several weeks or even a couple of months, then it's probably best to find regular work, regular employment. But in the meanwhile, while you're searching for it, see what you can do as far as getting independent kind of contracting work. One of the places that I have seen some people be successful is they get laid off from a company, and then the company realizes there were some important things that person knew, and then they need to kind of hire them back a little bit part time. And all right, well, the first thing that you think of when someone's offering to hire you back like that, they're going to try and offer you something similar to the hourly wage that they were paying you when you were an employee. Well, that
mm,
doesn't fly. Number one, and it's not just because you're ticked off at them because they fired you or laid you off. It's more importantly, it's the other unpaid benefits. It's the health insurance and the the your share, what they call the government, the employer's share of self-employed taxes and all of that. There's
Right.
in order to get the same hourly rate that you're getting at a regular employment job where you have benefits and all of that, you have to get paid a lot more. Sometimes it might be double or triple what you're getting, because you have to pay the so-called employer share of the taxes. But also,
Mm.
it's not a stable gig. You're not in a regular employee situation. The company doesn't have as many legal obligations to you as it does as if you were a regular employee of that company. So, but that is one way to sort of break into it a little bit. You're already familiar with the company, the organization. You know how things work. But and in some cases, if you're not under some type of non-compete, as long as you're not in a type of industry where knowledge of that specific company would be used to the detriment of a competitor, where you're just using your general knowledge and skills, then finding another company in a similar line of business, you may be able to do some consulting work for them. Just be very, very careful. You don't want to do anything that would compromise the integrity of the former employer, even though you're ticked off at them. You still have obligations of confidentiality for business specific stuff, but your general
Right.
know-how as being a very good worker and knowing an industry can be a good advantage to you in that sort of situation.
Yeah. So what was do you mind sharing some of your story? Like what
Hmm.
influenced you to go out on your own? Because you used to
Yeah.
work, regular 40-hour work week
Hmm.
for a big employer, but you don't anymore.
Yeah.
You are your own man.
Sort of.
Um, just depends on
Now,
who
yeah,
you ask,
back
I
back to
guess.
the partnership thing. I am my
Yeah.
spouse's man. How about that? We're together in
Right.
this, because it
Right.
definitely takes the whole family and the kids as well.
Right.
They've got to be sold on that also. But it actually goes back when I really got, kicked off the cliff or whatever, was a time when I'd left a previous employer because they got bought by somebody else. It wasn't because they were doing layoffs. As far as I know, they still haven't done layoffs. They've kept that business unit active and have continued hiring people. So it's a little bit different situation. But I left them just because the former CEO had promised a lot more than they delivered on in the acquisition, like
Mm.
about 1/10 of what they had promised. And that was
Oh, wow.
enough to make me very unhappy with that, because what I ended up getting with this new startup was less than if I had stayed at my previous employer and just exercised stock options that I already had. And
Mm.
while it wouldn't be a lot, it would have been enough that at either place, if I'd exercised those stock options or going to the new company, it would have allowed us to put in place a good emergency fund. I would have felt a lot safer financially. It's not like we would have been independently wealthy, couldn't have retired or anything like that, but it would have been
Yeah.
enough to pay off old student loan debts, maybe. Wouldn't have even paid off even a fraction of what we'd owed on the mortgage at the time or anything like that.
Mm.
But that was a not, obviously not a very good situation. We're very happy about that. Went to another little startup, but that startup wasn't terribly successful. So we were kind of going down the road to what most people consider more and more risky kinds of jobs. But
Working
as
for other startups.
for smaller startups. So the biggest
Mm.
concern going from that company after it was acquired to the first startup afterwards was, well, what about health insurance? Because that was a big deal. And we
Right.
looked into getting independent health insurance, individual policies, and it wasn't looking like a very good option. Fortunately, the little startup had gotten some health insurance lined up. It wasn't very good, but it was at least something. So that helped us make that little step. All right, then we got a little used to that being in what a lot of people would consider more risky. Well, after being there for a few years and seeing that they were having problems, we were able to then just push our comfort zone a little further and start doing some work on our own in parallel with that company. And then finally
So you
go,
started out like kind of part-time. You started
yeah,
like doing your own thing on the side, just on a
while
part-time
still
basis.
working for the startup, because the startup was kind of running short of money. And while they're still
Okay.
around and still doing okay, in part that's because uh, myself and some others could see the writing on the wall that the company wasn't going to survive. but we had built enough great products that it could continue working. They just couldn't afford to keep developing new ones. So we started working part time, and eventually, in our words, laid ourselves off. And we were working at these other jobs. And so it built to it slowly. And taking it back even
Okay.
further, going back to the
Yeah.
very first company I worked for right out of college. Yes, it was a full-time gig, wonderful company, fantastic place to work. Had
Yeah.
been voted, top 10 places to work by Fortune or Inc. or something like that many, many times, continues to be. Great company, takes really good care of their people. As an example, when there was a big financial downturn in the, what, early mid 2000s. It was well before the 2008 crash, but there was some significant downturn, and the upper management of the company, which of course gets paid very, very well, they get stock options and they're making tons of money, but as a show of good faith, they didn't do any layoffs until they had cut their own salaries a lot. We don't know, I don't remember exactly
Oh,
how much, but that was an amazing company to work for. They were great people, even in the
yeah.
leadership at the top. So while they were still making money hand over fist, they were doing their very best to take care of the rest of the people in the company. I really loved that.
Wow. Yeah.
But even
That
working
goes a
for
long
that,
way.
yeah, it does. But even working for that company, I was still, I guess I just have to stay really busy. I have to have lots of things going on, or I get bored too easily. But I co-founded, if you will, a video production company with a friend. So his spouse and my spouse were all on board, and we co-founded this in large part because he had kids that were in high school at the time. The business basically created DVD yearbooks, video yearbooks for schools and school groups, dance teams and orchestras and bands and things like that at high school. We even did a video yearbook for one of the Six Flags themes parks down there in Texas one year. That was a whole lot of fun because I got to take expensive cameras on big thrill rides that otherwise you would never be allowed to do. Now everyone's got POV videos, ride throughs of every ride because all they do is take their phone and hold it up. Hopefully they
Right.
don't drop it. That would be very bad. So even while I was working at this amazing company, I was spending a lot of my evenings and weekends shooting video, editing video, mastering DVDs and things like that for these video yearbooks and sort of commemorative kinds of things. So always had a little bit of that entrepreneur spirit, but there was nowhere near enough momentum at that point for that to be something that we would do. We would have done full time. Yes, I would have liked to jump into that full time, but the business model uh, probably wasn't well developed enough, and certainly the
Mm.
market wasn't big enough to produce the kind of income necessary to sustain a video production team. In the end, though, we ended up making just enough gross profit to pay off all the equipment. So basically, net profit of zero, but I got some toys out of the deal.
That's good.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so all along the way, you were doing little side gigs and things. What do you feel was one of the benefits, or maybe a few benefits from doing that, in terms of how that prepared you to finally go out on your own when you did later
Mm-hmm.
on?
Yeah, it was. First, you'll learn a lot about the basics of tax laws and stuff like that. You start out with just filing whatever it is, a Schedule C or something like that, just a little rider to your regular tax return that shows the business income and loss. And then over time, I began to learn a little bit more about how companies were structured and things like that. That's why later on it made more sense to be sort of an LLC, and that way we can have more than just myself as an employee. My wife can be part of that, and the kids can also be working for the company. Um,
Yeah.
Incidentally, that's a really great thing if you are self-employed, if you are entrepreneurial in that way, if you can involve your children in some way, I highly recommend it. I'm not a tax professional or anything like that, but talk to a CPA and make sure it's a possibility. But I'm of the understanding that you can start a retirement plan for kids even when they're minors, a minor Roth IRA, and they can't put a
Mm.
lot of money in it, but anything that they earned income that's reported to the IRS as taxable can be put into that Roth IRA as a retirement plan. So it may only be a few $100s, but over the 40 or whatever years before they retire, it can grow quite a bit and help them build their retirement savings way early. And the benefit of the Roth IRA is you don't have to pay the taxes at the end because you paid them at the beginning.
Right. That's nice. So you learned some of the kind of tricky parts about business. So you overcame some of those obstacles in starting a company
Hmm.
way before you were ready to go like
Yeah.
all in on it. That's
Yeah.
really cool. Um, what
And it
what are
even
some of the, go ahead.
you could
Go
say
ahead.
it even dates back further too, because growing up, while my dad was a college professor, so I didn't get a lot of business background from him because he taught in the outdoor recreation department. He wasn't teaching me business principles per se. But
Yeah.
my mother was running the family business that my grandfather had started, growing garden plants, basically a form of farming, but in greenhouses. And with that business, I got to learn a little bit from her about how businesses run and not that much about the finances because she didn't share a whole lot of that. And then my high school drama teacher that I've talked about in other podcasts, a most amazing
Yeah.
teacher, he taught myself and all the other students that were involved in his community theater some interesting things about business. Like in his case, corporate structuring. He wanted to buy a 100-year-old church and convert it into a theater. Also wanted to have sort of a theater company, and he whatever tax advisor he has suggested that he created a nonprofit entity that would own and hold the theater, and then I think it was a for-profit entity that actually produced the shows and would rent space from the theater, and that allowed him to do some things
Um,
a little bit different. I don't even know what the details were, but it
yeah.
made it easier for him to have this space that could be used for educational purposes while still being able to have for-profit shows that run in them to support the nonprofit entity.
Oh, that's interesting. Hence the reason to speak with a CPA.
Yes, always discuss it with a tax pro tax expert. Obviously, all of the laws have changed
Yeah.
so much over the years, but
Right.
they can help structure these things in a good way. Honestly, if I had my way, we wouldn't need all of that kind of advice, right? The tax code would be simple and straightforward, and we would all just
Yes.
pay a fixed percentage of our income and we'd be done. It'd be really
Yeah.
straightforward, right? Don't need to worry about that. But because it is the way it is, yes, absolutely. Get a good professional. They're worth their weight in gold, especially if you do things honestly, straightforwardly, and you're not trying to cheat on your taxes or something like that. And in fact, we go out of our way to pay extra on our taxes. So if we ever get audited, we'll be able to take more legitimate deductions so that we end up not having to pay extra if we're ever audited. If you
Yeah.
play it that way, hopefully you don't get in the crosshairs of the IRS or anything like that. Do your part, help support the country, and so forth. Pay your fair share of taxes because that's what helps the whole country run. That's my
Right.
totally off in the weeds public service
Yeah.
announcement
No,
for the
no.
day.
We'll, we'll take that segment. We'll put it in the like the political
Yeah, exactly.
podcast.
Right, totally.
Um, no, that's good though. Okay. So what are some of the, so you've been doing that. How long have you been self-employed?
Oh man, doing it full time like this at least 10 years now, maybe a little longer.
Okay. Okay. So that's plenty of time. You've gone through some ups and downs in the economy.
Hmm.
What are some pros and cons about being self-employed?
Of course, the pros you tend to have, you can't always, not every self employed gig gives you complete schedule flexibility, but some of them give you a lot more flexibility so that, when my kids have a school event or something like that, they're in a school play, they have a sports activity, something like that, I can generally arrange my schedule to be there, even if it's during the normal work hours and don't have to take vacation time for that. Of course, the downside, this kind of happens with any job really, but if you go on vacation, there's nobody there doing the work while you're gone, so you come home and you basically now have 2 weeks worth of work if you've taken a week off, maybe more. So it
Yeah.
piles up pretty quickly. I mean, that's part of why we've done what we do with Constellation Labs, and while we haven't been able to grow the team quite as widely as maybe we could have if we'd done it a more traditional way, there is some ability for different engineers to cover for one another when somebody is out of town, goes on a trip, or is otherwise unavailable. So that can
Yeah.
definitely help. In that case, you're sort of self-employed, but you're also sort of working with a group of people, and that can help reduce the amount of stress you have.
Yeah. So you've structured Constellation Labs. kind of like what you see in dental practices or like medical clinics, where it's not just a single doctor, it might be multiple doctors,
Hmm.
or a single dentist, it's multiple dentists who can fill in when necessary.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a little bit like that. There's some ability to cover. Fortunately, we don't have to have people on call 24 hours a day like those doctors do.
Yeah.
That's no fun.
Right. Right. Kind of a different situation.
But yeah,
Um,
we do get some urgent requests from time to time, but not quite like having to go in and do deliver a baby in the middle of the night or do an emergency surgery. It's fortunately nowhere near that level.
right. Yeah. Um, okay, what are some things that, like, to someone who's considering going out on their own, and having done this for a while now and looking back, what are some things you'd do differently, and what's some advice you would give to someone
Hmm.
who wants to get started in this?
Probably first advice I'd give to somebody getting started is if you've just been laid off, trying to jump into self-employment can be much more challenging. It can be a lot more
Mm,
difficult, especially if you don't have some good savings. If you have any kind of a balance on credit cards, if you have car payments,
mm,
uh, all those things will make it a lot harder. You may not know it at first. You may get a couple of jobs early on, but sometimes they will then drop off, and you may end up running up credit card debt or eating your savings really fast. So, if you really want to do the self employed thing, it's good to plan way, way ahead. So, don't get so mentally into it while you're still working the day job that you start mentally leaving the job. No, don't quiet quit or something like that. Uh, but use that opportunity as your focus. So while you're working that job, it can be hard to save up for a rainy day. It can be
mhm.
hard to get rid of credit card debt and other things like that. But do if you want to get serious about it, start out by cutting back your expenses, all the unnecessary expenses that you possibly can, and pay off as much debt as possible. And it doesn't matter if you use the debt snowball method or the debt avalanche method. You can go look those up. It's a matter of whether you're paying off highest interest rate or smallest balances first. They're both of them can work. It's just a matter of sticking to it. But get all that debt paid off at least like everything but a mortgage or rent, right? Because those costs you don't want to wait until that happens because that's going to take forever or a very very long time. But get those kind of consumer debt things out of the way. If you can possibly pay off a car, if it makes financial sense, sell a car, get a cheaper one that you can have paid off really quick. So get all the debt and then start piling up some money so that you have enough to live on for several months. The Dave Ramsey's and the other financial gurus will tell you 6 to 9 months or 9 to 12 months. Those are really good places to be savings wise. If you're debt free and have that level of savings, you will have such an easier time becoming an independent freelance contractor without having to worry about whatever credit card debts are there. And especially right now when interest rates are way, way higher than they have been historically.
Mm,
And for all we know, we're going to get way, way higher still. That credit card debt, the minimum monthly payment is going to get a lot bigger, a lot faster, and they could call those debts due or cut off your credit limit and leave you in a really bad spot. So get yourself
yeah.
situated financially, and while you're doing that, or once you've paid things off, start building some side work. So start working on getting to know people, network with them, and that might even mean for a first little project. Maybe it's I'd really like to. Maybe your dream is I want to remodel and refurbish old cars. Maybe the first thing you do is you find a place that does that sort of work and you go there. And even if they're not hiring, you offer to do something as simple as, hey, can I clean up around here? Can I sweep up, empty the trash, and look over your shoulder and see what it is you're working on? And then if that works out, maybe you can hire me part time later or hire me on a freelance basis or something like that. You may need to build up some additional collection of tools that you can use for that sort of thing. Or if you're doing Uber driving or something like that, do that work and take every dollar that you save from that and use that to help build up your emergency fund. And you're building some of your skills there, and you're finding out if this is something you really want to do. So
Mm,
you are building some business, also kind of interviewing potential clients at the same time, seeing if they're the kind of people you would like to work for. And then you begin to transition into, all right, I've been doing some work for free now. Now I need to actually start getting paid for some of it. And you figure out what your appropriate hourly rate would be. So that needs to be somewhat based on what is it going to take for me to survive if I'm working a certain number of hours per week, and also am I, how much value am I adding to this client? If I go in and offer to work for $20 an hour or $10 an hour, if the company's only going to benefit a few dollars worth for each hour of work I put in, it's not going to be a good return on investment for them. Similarly, if they pay me $50 an hour, but they're actually getting several $100s worth of value out of it, well, that's maybe more than would make sense. They're kind of making a lot of extra money off of your skills, and then it might be time to consider increasing your rate so that you're
Yeah.
capturing a little bit more of that value. Because if don't feel bad if you can't make it work with a certain client. It just might mean that it's just not well aligned with their business goals or their business model. That's okay. You don't have to be sad or mad or anything like that. It just doesn't work out, and that's okay. So you find somebody with which it does work, where the business models are compatible, where you can make a reasonable income and they are still making their business work and grow the way they need to.
Yeah. So if any of you out there need coaching for entrepreneurship, you can reach Jeremy at 555.
Right.
No, just kidding.
There you are.
No, that's really great. That's really excellent. Um,
Well, actually,
looking,
along those lines,
go ahead.
if they
Yeah,
did need help with a technical product development, right? If they needed
yeah,
an app developed or something like that, Sam would be really good at helping out with that. If you need a technical electronic product, yes, reach out to me.
right.
We'll talk. We'll get you connected with some of the engineers at Constellation Labs. But
Yeah,
most people who are going to be listening to this aren't going to be in one of those two niches. They're going to be in any number of businesses. It could be literally just about anything.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, okay, let me ask you this. Looking back on, you chose a certain path and how to do things, but if you could go back and do it all over again, what's one or maybe two things that you do differently?
That's a tough one. I can't think of any one particular thing. If I had known more when I was working at the first really good company before I left for the first startup, I
Hmm.
was given a little advice by one of the other engineers there. After I'd announced that I was leaving to go to this startup, one of the engineers said, "So, what percentage equity ownership do you have in the startup company?" I said, "You know what? I don't really know." And he said, "You really need to find that out." And if I could go back in time and give myself more advice, I would go back and explain not just that, but things about the way stock options vest and what is this equity and what are their sales looking like and what is the real valuation of the company and what is the what kind of margins are they making. I'd want to know a lot more about how the company actually works, because when you start working for a startup of any kind, if there's any kind of equity involved like that, unless they're paying you, well, if they're paying you just like you would for a big company, then it's not really the startup situation. You're there, you're getting paid very well as a good employee. You're giving the company value, they're giving you money and benefits in return, and all is well. But if you go into a startup, you're usually getting some equity and effectively taking lower compensation, not necessarily
Mm.
directly tied, because I think the IRS might have problems with, you can't just cut your salary in half, otherwise it becomes taxable income and some stuff like that. But
Okay.
you're willing to accept a lower salary because there's the hope that the equity deal will pay off. Well, what you're really doing in that situation is you become an investor in that company. And any big money investors that come into a startup company, they're not just going to write a check and hand over money to people. They are going to do their due diligence and figure out, does this company actually have prospects? What do their sales numbers look like? What are they doing cash flow right now? How much money are they losing or making? And all of that. So I would want to understand a lot more about that, because I might not have made the leap. Now, as it turns out, it was good that I did make the leap. Yes, I might have done it a little differently, but if it weren't for that, I wouldn't have ended up probably where I am today, working with the people that I do. So in the end, the journey is great wherever it takes you. You just do your best to enjoy it wherever it goes, and try and make the best decisions along the way. But I
Right.
will, and this one I'm hearkening back to this one because our background image today is a person standing in the middle of a big stage with a giant audience around them. It's because one of the topics that I wanted to mention for today was some people really wanted to be an actor or actress when they grew up, right? That
Hmm.
was their big dream. They wanted to become the big
Yeah.
star. But I'm
Yeah.
I want to I'm not sure that anyone knows this as well as real actors and actresses do, but is it really worth it? I ask you, Sam, if you were a famous actor right now, what if you were in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or something like that? You know, you were the Captain America or something like that actor. Yes, you'd get a whole bunch of money, and yes, you get all the fame and you get recognized everywhere. But what are the downsides of that kind of success?
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. I wouldn't even know how to answer that because I've never experienced anything like that. I mean,
Neither have I.
certainly the lack of privacy, you can't go anywhere without being recognized and having,
Hmm.
people wanting your autograph or maybe paparazzi following you around. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is I'd
Yeah.
want a little more privacy. I'd want to be able to go out, just, I don't know, buy a t-shirt or something if I needed to
Hmm.
without people like bothering me.
Yeah,
What
I
about
think
you?
that's I think that's a really good example of it. You know, can you even go out in public anymore without being recognized and mobbed by fans or something like that? That would make it
Yeah,
really hard. If you ever go to a restaurant, you better be a good tipper, or you're even if the service is
it's
terrible,
true.
you've got to be a good
That's
tipper,
true.
or people are going to trash talk you as being a cheapskate, even though you're this
That's
famous
right.
rich person, right? You get,
That's
like you
right.
said, no privacy. Walk through
Yeah.
when you go through the checkout line at the supermarket. You see all the tabloids there with pictures
Your
of
face,
and they're
your face is plastered
horrible
all over.
pictures, right? They're these pictures of they're just wearing an old T-shirt and sweats, and they're just walking down the street, no privacy at all. They're
Oh
hidden
my
spy
goodness.
cams. They're flying drones over someone's backyard to get shots of them out there in their swimming pool in the backyard, taking pictures of on the beach when they're having a wardrobe fail with their swimsuit or something. Just
Oh my
awful
goodness. Yeah.
stuff, right? So yes, there are definite downsides to that kind of job. Would it be awesome? Would it be amazing? Yeah, I'm sure it would be really cool. I've been on some I wouldn't call them film sets, but well, some of them definitely were real live film sets, full scale uh, Hollywood level production sets. Once in a while, I've gotten to help out with a few of those, and that's a good story for another day. But yes, there's a lot of fame, but there's also a lot of standing around and waiting and trying to get a
Mm.
performance just right. And the way what we see on the screen, it's this little framed one little section, and when they're acting out that scene. There's all the stuff that came before and after, but they don't shoot that all as one big scene generally. So you've got to be, as an actress or an actor, to be able to put yourself in that mindset. And I know it's definitely not as easy as any of us think it is, to be able to put
Yeah.
yourself there mentally and then perform it in a way that will connect with people. So, yes, it's fame and fortune, but it's also, I always used to say, no applause, just give me your money. I'd rather have the fortune, not the fame. I don't want to be rich and famous. I'd rather be rich and anonymous.
Yeah.
It's a lot better like that. But my attitudes and ideas have definitely changed over the decades. Used to be, I wish I was rich and famous so I could retire now and just do nothing. But being self-employed, because I do stuff that I love, even if I had a bunch of money drop in my lap today and never had to work another day in my life, I would keep doing a lot of the stuff that I do. But now, not because I have to make sure there's income, but just because it's fun to keep doing. You know, there
Yeah.
there are even some projects that I've worked on for family, friends, little startup companies that I'm just trying to help nurture along. That they couldn't afford the time or money or whatever. But if I had a big stack of cash, well, great, I could do that. I could help out, spend more time helping out. Some of the families that we're friends with that have financial and health challenges. Yes, we
Mm.
help out as much as we can, but there are certainly some people out there that are in need of some extra assistance and support. Sometimes it's monetary kind of support, but more often than not, it's just helping out and giving them a little emotional support by being there as a friend, and having a little more time to do that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. This has been really great. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate
Absolutely.
you answering these questions and, like being candid and all that stuff.
Yeah, thanks for coming up
Um,
with cool ideas for today. So we'll wrap it up, and then we'll be back again tomorrow or in the next couple of days here.
yeah.